Chloe Liu, i24News.
All right, let's bring in Matthew Brodsky, now Senior Fellow at the Security Studies Group. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. So before we launch into this discussion about ISIS and where we stand in that fight, I want to first get your reaction to really yet another report out of the Korean Peninsula that the North Korean regime has fired something again into the sea there. What do you make of this?
Well, it's entirely predictable that North Korea would have a response again to what the United States and their exercises with South Korea. I think the most important thing will be to find out technically what was fired, how far it went, and what it means as far as North Korea's nuclear development, because basically all they need is to perfect the miniaturization of the nuclear weapon and then perfect its ICBMs. And then they can target the United States homeland. And obviously, that's something the United States needs to prevent. And obviously, it's something that the U.S. needs to work at figuring out that you can't have a nation that's going to, you can't have them in a place where it's going to be like mutually assured destruction. That's not the template the U.S. should want to follow.
Certainly not. So we'll see how the White House responds to that later tonight, I'm sure. All right, let's switch gears now to the fight against ISIS. Where exactly do we stand in this fight right now?
Well, if from the Trump administration's perspective, at least from what they're telling me, the focus is 100% on ISIS, and I have not seen their plan to focus on Iran. And that, of course, is a problem. So, yes, ISIS is on its back heels. And you're looking at 3 locations now where most of the fighting is taking place. Raqqa with the United States and the Syrian Democratic Forces, Dar al-Zor in the east along the border with Iraq, and then the Lebanese border. ISIS is absolutely on the run. What's that?
You mentioned Iran. How come?
Well, essentially, we're putting back together the same situation, only slightly worse than it was before 2011 when the civil war broke out in Syria. So you're going to still have the exact same fundamental underpinnings that are going to create it's going to create the exact same type of rebellion. I mean, to put the exact same people under the rule of Assad is not a good situation for the United States or for Israel. And, of course, this extends the Iranian land bridge, which they've long wanted to do from Tehran to the sea. So the United States needs a plan to guard against that, and they have not done so. Just simply pushing the reset button to 2011, well, that's what got us here to begin with.
All right, let's talk about Afghanistan here. President Trump recently announcing this new strategy in Afghanistan, one that requires a troop increase. How do you see the escalation there potentially affecting the fight against ISIS on the whole? Well,
I suppose I wouldn't be the first to say there are no good answers, but right. The United States is essentially doing it's not something that you can stand in front of the cameras basically and say if you're the president. Luckily, I'm on your show. I can say it. It's not. The policy is essentially to do whatever we can to keep the Taliban from taking over Afghanistan and to keep ISIS from taking it over. We can't have it turn into the type of safe haven that it was prior to 9/11. But at the same time, there's no clear path toward victory. So there's no surge to 100,000 troops like there was before. So there's a smaller surge, and it's basically just to keep the situation from spiraling under control. Now, that's not what you want to tell your soldiers before deploying them over there, but that kind of happens to be what the situation is. It's to maintain and not to win, so to speak.
But the connection there between, our fight against ISIS and also, this long-standing fight that we've had in Afghanistan, what needs to happen there? Because obviously we just, recently reported, in the past 24 hours about ISIS claiming responsibility for attack on a mosque in Kabul. So what do we have a multifaceted fight going on there.
Correct. I mean, and that's why I said we're not leaving Afghanistan. We have to prevent that from turning into a safe haven. And but the unfortunate part.
But what does that prevention even look like, though?
Prevention means stopping them from having actual safe havens. You get in there and you destroy their places where they're gathering. I mean, there's obviously an ideological campaign that's probably more important in the long term as far as how you're going to deal with Islamism as an ideology that is fueling these type of terror attacks. But specifically when it comes to Afghanistan or throughout the entire region, ISIS happens to be the coolest kid on the block when it comes to being radical Sunni terrorists. So again, you're going to have to destroy them to the extent you can, but that doesn't necessarily take away the ideology, which requires another plan.
All right, Matthew Brodsky for us. Thank you so much. Well, the State Department is describing Jared Kushner's meeting